We got quarterbacks to talk about, running backs, wide receivers, and tight ends. So without further ado, we will first go into the quarterbacks. Two players that I think you should be focusing in on if they're available. These players are both owned in 60% of Yahoo leagues, and that is Matt Stafford and Tua Tagovailoa. Again, both owned in over 60% of Yahoo leagues, may not be available. Seems like they've returned to form. If they're not available, another quarterback you might consider adding would be Aaron Rodgers. He's owned in 43% of leagues. Kind of turned back the tides. Father Time kind of left the building, and we saw the Aaron Rodgers of old with Devontae Adams and Garrett Wilson. He looked good. I'm not a fan of him this season, but hey, this 3 touchdown game with now Devontae Adams getting double-digit targets, things were firing on all cylinders. So week 10, he's got a matchup at Arizona, which is a top 12 matchup in fantasy football. So Aaron Rodgers, not sure if this is going to be a flash in the pan or this is here to stay, but you could do a lot worse in your week 10 matchups than take this shot. He's obviously going to be throwing a lot. He has great supporting cast around him. So let's see what Aaron Rodgers does in another matchup here versus Arizona. Let's see if he can pan out to give us back-to-back consistent solid fantasy weeks. Still believe he kind of has that low floor, but definitely a high ceiling. Keep in mind he is on week 12 bye, so you only have him for the next couple of weeks before you have to consider another quarterback. Another guy you might want to consider owned in 44% of Yahoo leagues, that is Justin Herbert. Listen, Justin Herbert just had a bad start. I mean, it doesn't mean it's going to be a good ending. But he has, as of right now, has turned the tides a little bit. The first 5 games did not have a game over 200 passing yards. That didn't happen until week 6. But over the last 3 games, he's kind of redeemed himself. I think the Chargers wide receivers core has got healthy, and that has enhanced Justin Herbert's fantasy upside. We saw Quentin Johnson have that big week this past week. He's averaging over 300 yards these past 3 games. He does get a tough Week 10 matchup versus Tennessee. Pretty tough, as a matter of fact. So not expecting huge fireworks, but if you're in a deeper league, if he's out there and you like the matchup and you think he's going to hit again, Justin Herbert might be your guy. Some other guys you might consider starting, this week would be Drake May. Drake May's been hot. The rookie gets a tough matchup this week, but he might be someone to consider. Daniel Jones has a nice matchup versus Carolina. I'd take Herbert, Rodgers, Stafford, Tua over Daniel Jones, but he does have some high upside this game coming off a nice game last week. Also, Trevor Lawrence and Russell Wilson are other guys you may consider. Russell Wilson, of course, gets Mike Williams now. That might be a deciding factor, but for me, it's more of a wait and see with Mike Williams, see how it helps Russell Wilson. So those are quarterbacks to consider this week. Now we're going to take a look at the running back position. And my number one, you can follow me on Twitter at JohnnyFreakinF1, as it says under the screen. I put IDP as well as offensive rankings for waiver wires weekly. So if you want to check out more, follow me on X at JohnnyFreakinF1. This is just a snippet, some of my picks, but my number one running back pickup of this week, which really isn't a popular opinion, but he's definitely top 3 in any list you find. And that is 18% owned Isaac Guerendo. The last 3 games, Guerendo has had 25 carries for 186 yards and a touchdown. Not really all together. Those were 3 games and one bad game, in between the week, I believe it was 7 and 9. So I think week 8 was his dud. But yeah, as a whole, over those last 3 games, he showed he can tote the rock. Most importantly with this pickup is going to be the health, obviously, of Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason. Well, Jordan Mason aggravated that AC joint sprain he had. I'm not really banking on him. He might be someone, especially if you're in a shallow league, you can kind of cut bait at this point, because it does look like McCaffrey is intending to come back in week 10. We'll see if this week, if he can get full practices. Probably will need that in order to play. And if he does play, then Guerendo is strictly a stash if the often injured McCaffrey does get hurt again. But I think there's something to this guy with Guerendo. He's got a juicy top 10 matchup at week 10 versus Tampa Bay. Listen, let's call a spade a spade. Maybe a 1 game plug and play if McCaffrey isn't ready to come back yet. Maybe McCaffrey, for some reason, cannot play the rest of the season. Jordan Mason's having trouble with health. Then Guerendo looks like a huge upside pick. But regardless, I mean, it could be a zero game. Maybe McCaffrey comes this week, and that's all we hear of Guerendo. But anytime you have a backup, if you were drafting this season, you drafted Christian McCaffrey, you probably were looking at the back end of your draft for that handcuff. And this might be just the high upside handcuff in San Francisco that's not named McCaffrey. So I think it's a low promise but high risk, high reward kind of situation for Guerendo. We're also talking about a week at the waiver wire position, all positions in general, where it's just not that strong. So Guerendo doesn't mean you have to go pick him up, but if he's available, I would definitely stash him. It only owned in 18% of leagues. It might be a big hit, big lottery ticket for you. Next, this probably not a top 2, top 5, top 3, 5, anything priority add to really many experts out there, but I think Keaton Mitchell is a little bit overlooked. He probably is going to come back this week. Baltimore has a Thursday night game. Father Time is not really, or I should say, Mother Nature. With an early game isn't really on his side here. It's a Thursday night game. Maybe he's not able to get on the field, but it's still a continual stash. If you have an IR spot, he can be used freely. Maybe you got Hawkinson back, and now your IR spot's gone. Keaton Mitchell, I think, is the perfect ad for you. If you lock him in there, say Wednesday, and he's off IR, and you don't move him, maybe you can keep that extra player, Keaton Mitchell, see what he does, see what the touches are going to be this week before you have to make a decision for next week. But regardless, if you have a roster spot, Keaton Mitchell, I think, is a walking bomb. Somebody who I just don't think you can find skills that he has on the waiver wire, especially like I mentioned in a week for waiver wire pickups at the running back position and all positions as a whole. But Keaton Mitchell, don't forget, this is the yards per carry leader last year in 2023. One above Devon Achane, and we all respect Devon Achane. We know the type of player he is. He's a walking bomb himself. And I get it. Derrick Henry's there. This is a low floor but a high upside kind of stash and play. I wouldn't recommend playing him this week, but absolutely, if you're in a deeper league, pick him up, stash him. Let's see what the touches are going to be, the distribution. I really seriously doubt that Justice Hill is going to, just be gobbling up those number 2 reps, and there's going to be no meat on the bone for Keaton Mitchell. I think anytime you have a young electric guy, maybe he's coming off the injury, and they do want to, slow the process at first. But I do think he will be the number 2 running back in Baltimore, and I think he's a high upside. Not only a handcuff if Henry ever gets hurt, but I think he'll have some standalone value in games sporadically. The tail end of the season, you might have to wait till next season. Worst case scenario that it doesn't pan out for whatever reason. But yeah, I'm not really a Justice Hill guy coming into this year. Never really was. Still really am not. He's fine right now. But like when you have a player like Keaton Mitchell on your hands at your disposal, I think that's the route that to save Derrick Henry's wear and tear, to see what they have in the young player, see if it was, true, or maybe he's not that type of player. I think regardless, Baltimore can give touches to, different people many different ways. So I think Keaton Mitchell works his way into that backfield, only owned at 10% of Yahoo leagues. So we have Guerendo and Keaton Mitchell. Some other running backs you might consider targeting. One more I'll give you is Audric Estime, only owned in 1% of Yahoo leagues. I think it's important to talk about Estime, though, because this season he's had 15 carries, 95 rushing yards on the season. He was on IR, so he missed a couple games. Javonte Williams was looking good there for a minute, and then the wheels fell off again. Javonte is not Sean Payton's guy, didn't draft him. I'm not sure how long leash is that going to remain for Javonte Williams. Then you look at Jaleel McLaughlin, someone who I did like coming in this year, but really is kind of laid an egg. Outside of a few spike weeks, Jaleel McLaughlin has not been the player that myself, or I don't think the Broncos thought he was going to be this year. I thought big things were in his potential wise were in the cards for him, but doesn't seem like it's going to be the case. And with an uncertain backfield, seems like the the coach, Sean Payton, has came out and said that Audric Estime is going to get more touches as the season goes along. So especially if you're in like a 14, 16-man league, if you're in a 16, I think Audric Estime, based on upside, needs to be stashed. Probably not somebody who you're going to start this week in week 10, but nonetheless, anytime a coach comes out and says a young player is going to get more touches, I think that this deserves attention, and Audric Estime may have some late season appeal for owners, especially if in non PPR leagues. I don't think he gets a couple catches out of the backfield, but I don't think he's a huge factor there. More so goal line and maybe early down work for him if he can continue to be efficient with his touches. So if it's not Guerendo, Keaton Mitchell, or Audric Estime, some other running backs you may consider that maybe even are a little bit higher in rankings, but we all know who they are. We all know what they do. But those are Tyler Algier, Jalen Warren. I think could be a good bottom RB2, RB3 kind of flex start this week, maybe the rest of the season, and he has some handcuff value. Ray Davis is a guy who I also like from Buffalo, but he's kind of just a handcuff. You're not really banking on him with the touches he's getting. Khalil Herbert, we saw get traded to Cincinnati, so I think he might be worth something in a deeper league. And also, don't forget about Tyjae Spears. Tyjae Spears is a freak athlete, somebody who can break tackles and make damage, make a dent in the pass game. We've seen that last season. Tennessee's just looked bad on all facets, so I'm willing to put a little asterisk next to his name. Tony Pollard, we saw have some injury issues this past week, even though he did play. So Tyjae Spears, especially in PPR leagues, I think you could do a lot worse as far as stashing running backs. I'd rather have Tyjae Spears than Blake Corum at this point. Maybe if you look at injuries, you're counting on injury. Blake Corum, Trey Benson, those guys would be more valuable. But I think Tyjae Spears in PPR leagues can have some standalone value as well. As for our wide receivers, so my top guy this week, again, I don't think this is very consensus, but you got to take risks to get the biscuit in this fantasy football game we play in. So number one, I think somebody who is worth the waiver claim this week in a weak pool of players, just because there's not really much juice out there for us, and that's my number one wide receiver, owned in 28% of Yahoo leagues, and that is Ricky Pearsall. A lot of people think that Jawan Jennings is the better ad, and he might turn out to be. But, I understand that Jawan Jennings had a huge game earlier in the year. Brandon Ayuk's hurt. In that game, Jennings did well. A couple guys were banged up, and he was kind of like the focus. Him and Kittle were the focus of the offense. But I really don't think that's the truth. I don't think, even though that Ayuk's out, if Debo misses another week, I still think that Ricky Pearsall, I'm willing to bet on him as the better player down the stretch for fantasy teams. I just think he has a higher upside. Jawan Jennings, we kind of know the player he is. Maybe he pops off. I don't think consistency is going to be counted on him with as far as the box score fantasy. Now, he might have the higher upside week to week, but I think Ricky Pearsall is going to be the wide receiver you want in your lineup. I think he's going to be more consistent with his touches. He had the first game he played 4 catches, or was it 38 yards with a 39-yard rush, and that was in week 8. Again, we have no Ayuk here. We have George Kittle's probably the number one target. Then you have Debo and sure, Jawan Jennings, but just the way that Ricky Pearsall made a name for himself coming into the NFL, and I just think that the young, tantalizing potential he has as a player, I think eventually it's going to hit for him, whether it be week 10, week 11, or somewhere down the road. So, again, I'm not really banking on Jawan Jennings as much as I am the upside of Ricky Pearsall. So that's who I prefer to own in that receiving core. He's also got a juicy week 10 and week 11 matchup with Tampa Bay this week and then Seattle next week. Both of those would be top 10 wide receiver matchups. So it looks good for Ricky Pearsall. Love that pickup this week. Another guy who you want to target is Xavier Legette, still only owned in 27% of Yahoo leagues. Over the last 2 games with Bryce Young, 13 targets, 8 catches, 67 yards, and most importantly, 2 touchdowns in the last 2 weeks. So, again, he's going to probably have Bryce Young in week 10. So, you're looking at probably a team that has no Adam Thielen, probably a team that's going to be down, that's going to need to throw the ball. So the fact that Bryce Young, I mean, whether or not he's going to be the quarterback for the rest of the season, the future, that's all week to week. We can't bank on that. But what we can see is a little bit consistency with Legette and Bryce Young right now. So Thielen, unlikely to play to return in week 10. Seems like he's hesitant on practicing. So I wouldn't count on him for this week. And maybe that's going to eat into some potential with Legette when Thielen comes back. Maybe it draws some more attention off him, and Legette is not affected. But regardless, I think there is very good chance that Xavier Legette could be the number one wide receiver in Carolina the rest of the season. So not many waiver claims you can pick up out there to get a number one wide receiver, but actually you could get one more. I got one for you, and don't let this guy still go underappreciated, which he is right now, and only 32% of Yahoo leagues is he owned, and that's Jalen McMillan. I get it. He was inactive in week 9, hamstring injury. That's not really what you want to see. You're not banking on him. Maybe doesn't even start this week. And I'm not saying burn a waiver claim on him, but I do think that if you can get him for free when waivers clear, that's the type of pickup I'm looking for here. Because keep in mind, we do have Mike Evans supposed to come back in week 12. That's far from a guarantee. Mike Evans has had hamstring injuries before. They've lingered before. Could happen with anybody, let alone Mike Evans. But yeah, so if Evans has trouble coming back, I think it makes Jalen McMillan a even better rest of the season play. But I do think even say if Evans comes back week 12, I still am not shying away from Jalen McMillan. We've I think he was actually due for a better week, a better box score than he actually showed up. Looked like him and Baker weren't on the same page in week 9, but there was potential there. They could have had some big plays. You really don't have many other receivers there soaking up snaps. You don't have Evans right now. Godwin's out the year. You're looking at guys like Sterling Shepard, Trey Palmer. Yeah, I'm willing once again to take the young upside here with McMillan. He was the number one receiver week 9, and then week 8, and then week 9 did not play. So I mean, listen, bottom line, Baker Mayfield's playing well. Evans, nothing's guaranteed with health. I think at worst, Jalen McMillan will be the number 2 wide receiver, because they have K. Dotton. He's probably ahead of him on the pecking order, the chemistry he's shown with Baker Mayfield. But at worst, you probably have the number 2 wide receiver for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers for the rest of the season. So if you're in deeper leagues, this is definitely someone who could have safe touches and a very high upside, electric rookie. So with Baker Mayfield paired there, and he's going to probably need to throw the ball a lot, I think the chemistry gets better as the season goes. So just because he missed week 9 with a hamstring injury, I'm not writing off Jalen McMillan. I think he's a very good player to stash with big upside. And if not Pearsall, Legette, or Jalen McMillan, some other wide receivers to consider are the whole Cleveland Browns receiving corps. Jerry Jeudy, Cedric Tillman, if he's somehow still available, Elijah Moore. Those are guys to consider, but they're on bye this week. Next is Jalen Tolbert. It looks like CeeDee Lamb's going to, in fact, play, but regardless, Jalen Tolbert's arrow has been trending up all year. Probably get some more love this week, some more attention with CeeDee Lamb a little bit ailing, even though it's going to be Dak Prescott's on IR and they have Cooper Rush starting. But I expect them to probably need to throw the ball. I don't really see them, winning while stomping on teams while Dak's on IR. So I think, Jalen Tolbert could be a nice get for you. Demario Douglas, not a huge yardage guy, but I think he did have 9 targets last game, and he does seem to have good chemistry with Drake May, getting those dump offs, those check downs for 5-6 yards. Anytime you get 7 catches for 40, 50 yards in PPR, it's a serviceable week. And I think that's the type of player that Demario Douglas is, with some upside. So I think he's a fine stash, fine week 10 play. Then you got Adam Thielen, who I'd mentioned before. Probably not count on him for this week. Won't get much production if you do, coming back from that hammy off IR. But whenever it does happen, hey, if it's not Legette, it could be Thielen being the number 1 there in Carolina. And again, you can't really, even though that's not the ideal team you want a number 1 on, at this point in the season, wide receiver 1s don't pop up too often. So he deserves some attention. Quentin Johnson off a big week. I'm not willing to invest too much in it. Parker Washington, maybe if you're in a deeper league, 16-man league, and other guys, Jalen Coker, Josh Palmer, Nick Westbrook-Akine. And then the traded wide receiver from the Jets to the Steelers, Mike Williams. Maybe if you're in a deeper league, throw a dart, throw a dart and get Mike Williams. He might have some upside, big red zone body. So again, not a great week for wide receivers or any positions in general, but that's my feelings on the wide receiver position. And before we get into our tight ends, I just wanted to mention, if you are not subscribed to IDP Plus, please go ahead and do so right now. We have some great content coming out every day. Waiver wire, dynasty. I do IDP Plus trends where we go over rankings, weekly rankings for IDP at all three positions: DL, DB, and linebackers. So become a subscriber. Go to our website, idpplus.com, and I'll do you one better. Right now, we're running a promo. The promo is 20% off site wide. So get your 20% off subscription for a limited time using the promo code PROPS and get access to our tools, our data, our IDP articles, and don't miss out on our subscriber Discord where you can ask us your betting questions, your fantasy start sit questions, and all 30 plus of us at the IDP Plus team will be there to answer your questions. So become a subscriber today and use the promo code PROPS to get your 20% off site-wide purchase. Moving into our last position, our tight end position. Pretty standard this week. I'm not really going to go against the grain with consensus rankings too much. Although I'm not going to put Taysom Hill as my number one. I'm going to say that Mike Gesicki, because we're looking at middle of the week now, and T. Higgins has not resumed practicing. Probably going to be inactive again. Mike Gesicki coming off a huge game, looked like a wide receiver. As a matter of fact, it wasn't Jermaine Burton, Yoshi Voss, the receivers to be, picking up the slack from T. Higgins. It was Mike Gesicki with 5 catches for 100 yards and 2 touchdowns. He's had 3 big games now when T. Higgins has been out. So it's kind of like, if Higgins somehow plays, I'm not really counting on Gesicki. I wouldn't go burn a waiver claim on him unless you absolutely need a win and there's nobody else out there. There's a couple guys on this list we can get to. But yeah, Mike Gesicki, he's basically a wide receiver for Joe Burrow right now. He's got 2 juicy matchups coming up this week, week 10 versus Baltimore. Give up plenty of receiving yards. And then next week, week 11 versus the Chargers. So 2 top 10 matchups for Gesicki coming up. Not guaranteed next week. Not even guaranteed this week. Higgins could somehow turn around and play, but it looks like for this week, week 10, Mike Gesicki is a smash tight end, and I just can't. With Taysom Hill's gadget abilities, yeah, he might have higher upside, but if Higgins is indeed ruled out, I think the guy who I'd rolled with hands down would be Mike Gesicki, just because it's not like a flash in the pan one game. We've had 3 games now where Higgins has been out and Mike Gesicki has balled out. So yeah, I think the touches he's going to get is going to be more consistent than Taysom Hill, and Taysom Hill to me has to really get in the end zone to return value. So Mike Gesicki coming off a huge game, big momentum. Let's keep it rolling. My next guy is Jatavian Sanders. This is for deeper guys, deeper leagues out there. Only owned in 1% of Yahoo leagues. 2 out of the 3 past weeks. Week 7, big game, 6 catches, 61 yards. Week 9, 4 catches, 87 yards. I believe he had a 46-yard catch. So this may be the Carolina number 1 tight end. Of course, they drafted him thinking that. We all assumed that. But it takes a while for rookies to kind of get going, especially on a Carolina offense with Bryce Young. So regardless, I think other tight ends are having problems staying healthy, and opportunity is half the battle in fantasy football. And he's being on the field, utilized. Seems like he has a good rapport with Bryce Young. So great athlete. I think this is a low floor but a high upside type of play. And over the last 3 weeks, he's been getting 4, 5, 6 receptions. So as much as the low floor is there, because he had a dud in week 8 with Bryce Young. But, like I said, high upside. Nothing's given in fantasy football. But I think if you're really hurting for a tight end out there, this is a guy with upside who I think can help you not only this week, but let's see if he can get some momentum with Carolina's offense and be a household name by the time the end of the season comes. So keep in mind, Jatavian Sanders, the only downfall I can say on him, Thielen's out. Like they really don't have many wide receivers there. Just traded Mingo. Like opportunity is there, should increase, but he does have a tough Week 10 matchup versus the Giants, who really don't give up much to tight ends. So Jatavian Sanders, Mike Gesicki, fine streams this week. Other people you might consider, but you already know who they are, and that is Hunter Henry, fine play. Taysom Hill, I get it, fine play. Jonnu Smith, he's been rolling. Don't think he's going to really keep it up, though. Zach Ertz, I think he rebounds this week, is a decent tight end too. And finally, Theo Johnson with the Giants. There's maybe other guys to consider. But, hey, guys, thanks for listening. I'm going to wrap it up here. Check me out next week looking for waiver wire key pickups. And, again, I put more out on for the sake of time, I don't want to talk about all my picks. But if you'd like to look at my ID picks, defensive linemen, linebackers, the defensive backs, or see the rest of my list on offense, follow me on X at JohnnyFreakinF1 and subscribe to our channel at idpplus.com.
Thank you for watching the IDP Plus YouTube network. If you enjoyed this video, give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Be sure to tap the bell icon to get notified whenever we upload new content.